So Star Wars Rebel Rising is a book that tells the life story of Jyn Erso. It's very much a prequel to Rogue One, and it assumes, and I'm going to assume, that you have seen Rogue One. So in that film, it starts off with this kind of prologue situation where Jyn Erso's mother is killed and her father is taken, and then there's a big time jump to her in a prison cell, and the story of that movie begins. This is entirely the in-between. What happened between her being rescued by Saw and her being in the prison cell that led her to be the person that she is in the film. And with that, it's a very frustrating book. I wasn't bored by it. It was kind of interesting and gives you a lot of insight into her, and especially gives you insight into Saw Gerrera. But the problem inherently with the way that this story is written is that Jyn Erso's life before the events of Rogue One is not very interesting. There's not a big adventure that she goes on, which I would say is a positive about this story. And therefore, essentially, this book, if you have the story of Jyn Erso's life, this book feels like Acts 1 and 2, and Rogue One is Act 3. So you get the setup for her life in the part of the first half of this book. Then the back half of this book kind of shows her really struggling in life, finding herself in a low place in life, and then it kind of ends. And Rogue One continues onward. And this is very much the problem with this story, is that this book felt like, when it came to an end, I was like, no, keep going. Keep going. You're getting really good right now. You're getting really interesting right now, where there's character development and we're understanding her and the emotion going on behind her. But where it ends is Rogue One. And I wanted the book to continue on and tell the story of Rogue One from her perspective, what she's thinking through the events of the story in light of what happened in the book Rebel Rising. And it's kind of a short book, in which case it could have kept going to add this in there, but it didn't. And therefore the story of it feels really incomplete. It feels like her story doesn't go anywhere except kind of nihilistic, like it ends with her having no purpose and no meaning. And then there's an epilogue that kind of ties very much to Rogue One, where you start to get a little bit of hope. But essentially where the actual story of this book takes us, it leaves her really in a hopeless place without a purpose. And it's kind of a downer with the way the story works. Like, if you read this book before seeing Rogue One, it would be a downer. You wouldn't like Jyn Erso very much. You'd think, oh man, this is kind of an unlikable character, because of where it leaves it. Which is to say, if you take almost any story and you cut off the third act, you cut it off where there's resolution to everything established, and you leave it at kind of this, they talk about kind of the low point for the character, where all is lost in a rom-com. It's where the two people break up. In a story, it's when the bad guys feel like they've defeated everyone. So in the three parts of the original Star Wars trilogy, at the end of Empire Strikes Back, Han has been taken captive. Luke's hand has been cut off. The Empire has won. You're at this low point, and that's where this book ends. And so it's a very frustrating story. So let's talk about some good things about it. First off, it's not boring. It moves pretty quickly. And so you really get some insight in kind of the Saw Gerrera terrorist side of the Rebel Alliance, in what they're doing, what that looks like, kind of how he thinks, and see kind of the positive side to him that puts him in a much more positive light, while not ignoring the negative sides to him, still making him a total weirdo. But you much better understand who he is, why he is, and kind of give us a sweeter side to him, and the guy that had to raise this girl. And there's a lot of kind of fun in seeing the missions in that side of it. Likewise, you get to see the life of Jyn Erso in a way that what I really appreciated is that it didn't try and tell this big, exciting story of her as a smuggler, and then she ran into Han Solo, and then she went and met Lando. It doesn't do that. It doesn't fantasize her life into this thing that just feels like fan fiction, where she was high-fiving everyone you love from Star Wars. No, it felt very much like a reasonable backstory that would lead up to the events of Rogue One, that she would have the charges that she would have the skills that she has, that she would have the worldview that she has, without trying to tell too extravagant of a story within that. And that's the big positives. I really enjoyed the Saw Gerrera stuff, which is probably the first third of the book, first 40% of the book. And then let's kind of talk about the bad, and it ties pretty heavily to what I've mentioned already, which is it doesn't tell a big, exciting story. In which case, the first third of it, the first 40% is really interesting with Saw Gerrera. And then from there, it's just kind of her as a free adult. It's her just kind of drifting from place to place, and some of it's more interesting than other stuff. And it's like her meeting her first love, her having a bit of normal life, her kind of being homeless, her on some adventures, her developing her skills and committing some crimes. In which case, it doesn't have a lot of focus to it. Like, it's not heading in a direction. And because it ends where it ends, the book doesn't have a direction. It's just kind of, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. If the book continued into the third act of the book was Rogue One from her perspective, it would be a much more cohesive book. The way the story works is it has flash forwards to her in prison. And so, which isn't a spoil. It's just the way the book is written. It has flash forwards to her. You'd probably trim that part, tighten it up. You could tighten up some of the details in it, in which case the story would be Act 1 is her with Saw Gerrera. And then Act 2 is her becoming disenfranchised with the rebellion, being hurt by Saw, being hurt by her father, being hurt by the Empire, and kind of having no loyalties and losing all faith in everything and just being this loner with no purpose. And then the third act would have so many moments of payoff, and there's resolution to all of these open-ended things that are established in this book that they're hinted at through dialogue. Her relationship with Saw, her relationship with her father, her understanding of that, her worldview that makes her will be kind of hesitant to join the Rebel Alliance, but also hating the Empire and ended up joining the Rebel Alliance. All of those are really powerful emotional payoffs if this was the third act to the book, in which case, such a weird, uneven book, because it would give this big finale. It would give it an exciting end to everything. All of it would work so much better, so much payoff. And I legitimately, when the book ended, I was like, serious, I want you to keep telling Rogue One. I know where it goes. I know everything that happens, but it would be such a good payoff to everything you just set up. And so as is, it feels like 2/3 of a book. A decent, good 2/3 of a book, not a great 2/3 of a book. With all that said, if I'm going to give my recommendation for you, if you are a big fan of Rogue One, it does have some interesting information about Saw Gerrera, especially a little bit about Jyn Erso, and it's not boring. It's pretty quick, and so I'd give you a moderate recommendation for it. However, if you're not a Rogue One fan, skip it at all costs. This is not the Star Wars book to start with. You will be frustrated, and I wish I could give it a stronger recommendation because on so many levels, I was like, man, I want to go rewatch Rogue One now to kind of finish out Jyn Erso's story and have all the payoff. So much payoff that this would be if it was the third act to the book, but it's not. It's an incomplete book because of the way they decided to do things. The book has no real big payoff. It just sets you up for payoff, which is Rogue One. Anyway, those are my thoughts on it. If you've read it, go ahead and tell me your thoughts down below in the comments section. Did you get more out of this book, or was it kind of as frustrating as I felt it was in that it could have been so much more? It was so close to being so much more, but unfortunately, it wasn't. Let's talk about it down below. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I mostly do movie reviews and TV reviews, but I also do the occasional Star Wars book review, actually about one a month. As soon as my Audible credit comes in, then I start talking about these. A certain new Star Wars book. But also, I got a movie trivia show where me and some other YouTubers battle movie trivia, and if you like that stuff, go ahead and check that out. It's a lot of fun what we do on there. With all that said, thank you for watching.